Welcome to the Relationship Diversity Podcast, where we celebrate, question, and explore all aspects of relationship structure diversity, from soloamory to monogamy to polyamory and everything in between, because every relationship is as unique as you are. We'll bust through societal programming to break open and dissect everything we thought we knew about relationships, to ask the challenging but transformational questions: who am I, and what do I really want in my relationships? I'm your guide, Carrie Jaroslaw, best-selling author, speaker, intuitive, and coach. Join me as we reimagine all that our most intimate relationships can become. I released my first episode of this podcast on September 27th, 2022. I've been overwhelmed and humbled by the number of people who've expressed deep resonance with the messages of relationship diversity and all that it encompasses. This includes knowing your unique self to create your unique relationship, understanding all the varied ways that relationships can be designed, releasing societal, familial, and cultural programming to get to know your needs and desires, and finding the gold that lies outside and in between these constricting boxes and labels. I thought it would be fun to do a year-end review episode of all that's been discussed so far. I've touched on so much in these few short months. So if this is your first episode that you're listening to, you'll be able to jump right to the one that most resonates. And if there's something that you'd like me to talk about that I haven't yet talked about, I'd love to know what you're wanting to learn about. So send me a message. Okay, let's start the review. So first, I want to talk about the trailer. This doesn't have an official episode number, but it's important nonetheless. In the trailer, I share my intentions with the podcast and an overall idea of what I'll be speaking about. This is my invitation to question what you may have previously thought about intimate relationships and begin exploring and reimagining all that they could become. Episode 1 was titled, "What is Relationship Diversity? Could it really be the answer to more fulfilling relationships?" In this episode, I define what relationship diversity is and why I feel like it's the answer to wounded, painful relationships. I go into more about me and why this topic is so important to me, and talk about a new barometer for what a successful relationship looks and feels like. Episode 2 is called Exploring Diverse Relationships. In this episode, I talk about 4 main relationship structures, including soloamory, monogamy, ethical non-monogamy, specifically open relationships, and polyamory. I look at the idea of labels, where they're useful and where they can be damaging. Episode 3 is Wounded versus Healed Expression in Diverse Relationships. In this episode, I look at each relationship structure from the perspective of either our wounding or our wholeness. This is important because regardless of the structure you choose, if we're coming from our unresolved pain, our relationships will feel unfulfilling or hurtful. I give examples of how each structure can play out from these 2 different perspectives. Episode 4 is called Letting Go of Relationship Expectations to Find the Gold. This episode talks about the foundation of relationship diversity. I talk about letting go of the expectations of how you think a relationship should be to design a relationship based in who you really are. Here we talk more specifically about the idea that every relationship is as unique as you are. Episode 5 is called Your Number One Relationship, the Relationship with Self. And in this episode, I go into how imperative it is to know who you are before knowing what you want in a relationship. Your most intimate relationship needs to be with yourself first and foremost. And this sets you up to create and maintain all your relationships in life by giving you an internal resonance barometer with people and circumstances. Episode 6 is called How Do I Get to Know Myself? So now that I talked about in episode 5 about why the relationship with yourself is so important, in episode 6, I give ideas and tips on how to cultivate this self relationship. If you've never done self-inquiry or reflection, this is a great place to start. Episode 7, questioning societal and cultural norms. In this episode, I look deeper into societal, cultural, and familial norms and how they can affect our intimate relationships for the better and for the worse. I talk about how to release the ones that don't resonate with you and how it all begins with awareness. Episode 8 is called The Future of This Podcast. Will you join me? In this episode, I talk about my visions and intentions for the future of this podcast. This was the last episode of my first month. And although now I'm completing my third month, some things have shifted and morphed. My intention and desires are still the same. Episode 9 is called Let's Take a Deeper Look at Solo Amory. This episode was the first of 5 episodes that I took one specific relationship structure, going deeply into what it is, why someone would choose it, how to find diversity within the structure, and what someone who chooses this structure might face in terms of societal or familial judgments. I also look at what we can learn from this structure, even if we don't choose to practice it. In episode 9, I zero in on solo amory, which I define as choosing to have the most intimate relationship with yourself. Episode 10 is Let's Take a Deeper Look at Monogamy. In this episode, I go deeply into monogamy, the structure where one has an intimate relationship with one other person. With other structures becoming more present, sometimes monogamy gets a bad rap, but it works really well for many people. And in this episode, we look at why this might be. Episode 11 is Let's Take a Deeper Look at Ethical Non-Monogamy. In this episode, I take a deep dive into ethical non-monogamy, or choosing to have an intimate relationship with more than one person. There are a lot of misperceptions about this structure and a whole lot of judgments. I break this down and even talk about what you can learn from this structure, even if you choose to practice something different. Episode 12, let's take a deeper look at open relationships. In this episode, I look at open relationships, which is under the umbrella of ethical non-monogamy. Open relationships are different than other forms of ethical non-monogamy, and I explore all of this and more. Episode 13 is Let's Take a Deeper Look at Polyamory. This episode is all about a form of ethical non-monogamy called polyamory, or many loves. In polyamory, one person has more than one intimate relationship that is consensual and ethically practiced. What does that mean? Well, take a listen to learn more. Episode 14 is called Is It Selfish to Love Yourself? In this episode, I talk about how I grew up with the belief that it's selfish to love myself. But when I realized that I couldn't expect a partner to love me if I didn't love myself, my relationships began to greatly improve. If you're struggling with self-love, this is a great episode to help you begin to make this important mindset shift. Episode 15 is called Judging Something That's Different. I love this episode. Let's be real. We all have judgments, and most of the time, these judgments keep us safe, but also keep us disconnected from others. In this episode, I talk about why we judge, when it's beneficial, and when it's damaging to judge, and give you 4 ways to shift from judgment to compassion. Episode 16, Is Jealousy Keeping You Stuck? This episode is all about jealousy. Regardless of what relationship structure you're in, jealousy can enter, causing disconnection and resentment. But there's always something underneath the jealousy, a deeper message and opportunity that the jealousy is covering. I explore this and give you steps to meet this emotion with curiosity and gratitude. Episode 17, COVID musings on the concept of fluidity. This episode started off as an experiment. I recorded this while recovering from COVID, and I was super spacey, but I had a lot of flooding in, no pun intended, about the concept of fluidity and how I feel this is an important step in humanity's evolution. Episode 18. Could this one perspective shift heal the divisiveness in humanity? In this episode, I explore a different way to look at relationships that will support our personal evolution and healing. When I made this perspective shift, I was no longer a victim to my relationships. They were supporting me, even in the challenging moments. Episode 19 is called Real Talk. There is no magic finish line with your healing journey. When I embraced the belief that my healing was a journey, instead of putting an expectation on some magical finish line where everything would be perfect, my outlook on life dramatically shifted. I stopped saying things like, I thought I dealt with this, and instead stayed curious. In episode 19, I go deeper into this idea and give you tips to stay present with your healing journey. Episode 20, Self-care is not a luxury. This episode is all about the importance of self-care. I talk about my own journey from always giving to others in my work and how this completely depleted me, to prioritizing daily self-care and how this brought me the ability to give more to others. I also give you 3 steps to develop your own daily self-care practice. It's so much easier than you think. Episode 21, Conversations with Alana Israel about solo amory. This is the first episode in my conversation series where I bring other voices and perspectives into the relationship diversity movement. In this one, I talk to Alana Israel, a relationship coach who has very consciously and intentionally chosen to be single at this point in her life. She tells her story of going from a marriage with an addictive husband to happily embracing solo amory while raising her son. Episode 22, Could exploring your identity lead to more fulfilling relationships? In this episode, I talk about identity and learning who we really are. That goes beyond labels and superficial markers. When we know who we are, we're able to know what we want in our relationships. Episode 23, Conversations with Andrea Atherton about love anarchy. Episode 23 is another episode in my conversation series. In this one, I talk with Andrea Atherton, host of the Love Anarchy podcast and a love mindset coach. We talk about redefining what love is, especially if you grew up in a toxic household. Episode 24, Do these 3 things before attempting to open a monogamous relationship. In this episode, I talk about what to do if you want to shift your current relationship structure from what it is to something else, or if you desire to bring elements of a particular structure into your current structure. Although I use going from a monogamous relationship to an ethically non-monogamous relationship as the focus, this episode is intended for any desired shift. I also give you a 3-step process to give you a strong foundation before embarking on the journey. Episode 25, Conversations with Deborah Lee May about resiliency and reinvention through long-term relationships. Another episode in my conversation series. This one is with my good friend Deborah Lee May, who is a resiliency and reinvention coach. We talk about long-term relationships, and she gives tips to reinvest and reinvent who you are as your relationship progresses. I learned so much from this discussion that I'm already bringing into my personal relationships. Episode 26. Is it really possible to manifest your dream relationship? Did you know that I manifested my husband? I know, it may sound out there, but I wrote out everything I wanted in a partner, and eventually, after about 2 years, after I did my healing work and learned important lessons from other relationships, he walked right into my life. I talk about this and give you 2 spiritual concepts to help support it. Will 2023 be the year you call in your dream relationship? Episode 27, The Importance of Authentic Human Connection Within Relationships. In this episode, I talk about connection and how important it is in every relationship, whether fleeting or sustained. This basic human need gives us a sense of belonging. But how do we establish authentic connection when we've been hurt in the past? I look at this and more. Which leads us to this episode 28, my year-end review. What a 3 months it's been, and I'm really excited about what's to come in 2023. I've already got incredible guests lined up. We'll be exploring topics like sensuality, outside-the-box diversity that you may have never thought about, pleasure and sexuality and the taboo, communication styles, and so much more. I'm also allowing some ebb and flow to the structure of the podcast, including how often I publish. I'm breathing into the fluidity of this living, breathing, creative process. More on that to come. And I'm continually looking at how I can best support you on your intimate relationship journey. Stay tuned to learn about a new live group experience that I'll be releasing in the spring of 2023. The possibilities are limitless, and I hope you'll join me to uncover all that our most intimate relationships can become. Stay curious. Thank you for listening to the Relationship Diversity Podcast. Want to learn more about relationship diversity? I've got a free guide I'd love to send you. Go to www.relationshipdiversitypodcast.com to get yours sent right to you. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to the podcast. You being here and participating in the conversation about relationship diversity is what helps us create a space of inclusivity and acceptance together. The more comfortable and normal it is to acknowledge the vast and varied relating we all do, the faster we'll shift to a paradigm of conscious, intentional, and diverse relationships. New episodes are released every Tuesday and Thursday. Stay connected with me through my website, carriejaroslow.com, Instagram, and TikTok. Stay curious. Every relationship is as unique as you are. Are you wondering why you never seem to find lasting fulfillment in your relationships? Or do you create the same kinds of relationship experiences over and over again? Can you never seem to find even one person who you want to explore a relationship with? Have you just given up hope altogether? If this sounds like you, my recent book, Why Do They Always Break Up With Me, is the perfect place to start. The foundation of any relationship, whether intimate or not, is the relationship we have with ourselves. In the book, I lead you through 8 clear steps to start or continue your self-exploration journey. You'll learn about the importance of self-acceptance, gratitude, belief shifting, and forgiveness, and given exercises to experience these life-changing concepts. This is the process I use to shift my relationships from continual heartbreak to what they are now, fulfilling, soul-nourishing, compassionate, and loving. It is possible for you. This book can set you on a path to get there. Currently available through Amazon or through the link in the show notes.